classmates, Billy Hobbs here. My transmittable pathogen is tuberculosis. You often hear of tuberculosis as TB, which is the abbreviation for it. It comes from the bacterium Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Let me just tell you a little bit of background information about tuberculosis. It is an airborne illness, and so if you think of just one cough and how it's able to produce 3,000 droplets, and oftentimes those droplets can be expelled from the back of our throat at 50 miles per hour, if a person who had active tuberculosis were to cough while you were in the room, then you are now at risk for either developing active tuberculosis or becoming infected with tuberculosis. The difference between those two are when you are infected with tuberculosis, you don't experience symptoms, and oftentimes you don't even realize that you have tuberculosis unless you've been tested. In active cases, you are experiencing symptoms and you are highly contagious. The infected cases are known as the dormant cases, but they're actually pretty scary because at any time the tuberculosis that's in your body can decide to reproduce and you can develop an active case, boom, like that. Tuberculosis has 5 stages in its life cycle. The first stage is onset, which happens in the first 1 to 7 days, and that's basically when you have breathed in the vapors or the air of someone who has an active case of tuberculosis, meaning they're highly contagious. The next step is called symbiosis, and that's where the bacteria that is not killed in your system right away, it begins to reproduce. So your body initially tries to fight it off, but it becomes too much. So in the symbiosis stage, what has not been killed already begins to reproduce. The next stage is called initial caseous necrosis, and this happens within the next 14 to 21 days. And basically, this is where any bacteria that was not able to reproduce is killed off, and then the ones that were able to reproduce begin to slow down their reproduction and basically settle in your system. And although they can't reproduce any longer, they can live in your system for a very long time, which is a scary thing if left untreated. The next stage is called the interplay of tissue damaging and macrophage activating immune response phase. So it happens after 21 days. And this is the stage where your, I want to make sure I'm saying this right. Macrophages surround the tubercle but may become inactive. So basically, tuberculosis is beginning to grow in your system. It's not reproducing, it's just growing what is already there. And it can start breaking off and spreading around your whole body. And it can even spread to your blood and other organs. People often think of it only in the lungs, but that's actually not true. It can spread to your spine, it can spread to other organs, it can go to your blood, which becomes very scary because if we consider our blood is throughout our body, and it's called miliary tuberculosis when it is spread into your blood outside the lungs. The last and final stage doesn't occur in everyone who has active cases of tuberculosis. It is the liquefaction stage. So basically the tuberculosis virus turns to liquid and begins to spread at an even faster rate. Super scary stuff. So you can experience several symptoms when you have an active case of tuberculosis. So it begins with a cough that gradually gets more and more severe and produces more and more mucus and eventually leads to you coughing up blood, which just sounds completely awful to me. And then you experience a great amount of pain wherever your tuberculosis virus has settled. So, in some cases it settles in more than one place. In other cases, it might just be the lungs or the spine. Well, you experience pain in those areas, a great amount of pain. And there are ways to be tested to see if you're infected with tuberculosis or if you have an active case. Doctors simply do a skin test right here on your arm, and what they do, they take a needle that has a small amount of tuberculin on the end of it, and they inject it deep into your skin. And if your skin begins to bubble or turn red and basically react to that injection, then you know that you are infected with tuberculosis or you have an active case of it. There is a vaccine available for people who feel like they could be at risk for tuberculosis. For example, if you were a missionary who traveled abroad and visited several countries, you would be a good candidate for the vaccination of tuberculosis. Or if you have family members in another part of the world where tuberculosis is prevalent, then you would be a good candidate for the vaccine as well. The vaccine has proven to be 50% successful, meaning that in 50% of cases, people did not develop tuberculosis because they were armed with the vaccine. Now, if you do develop an active case of tuberculosis, there is treatment available. You take several antibiotics, more than one, and it takes 6 months to 12 months to be healed of this disease. Now, sadly, every case of tuberculosis cannot be healed. 4 to 6 people out of 10 pass away due to tuberculosis symptoms. Now, oftentimes, tuberculosis deaths happen more in poverty-stricken areas because those people sadly don't have the resources to pay for the treatment and seek the doctors that know how to treat tuberculosis. However, that's not always the case. In this book, Tuberculosis by Tony Alman, I found a very interesting fact that was sad to me. Scarlett, who we know from Gone with the Wind, her actual actress name is Vivian Lee. She was a victim of tuberculosis. She actually passed away from tuberculosis, and we know that she had a great amount of wealth because she was a successful actress. Gone with the Wind was a very successful movie. One thing I wanted to point out about tuberculosis and the damage that it does, this book explains that it eats holes in the lung tissue. So when you see a healthy pair of lungs, you don't see a pair of lungs that has holes in it. You see a nice smooth pair of lungs. Well, this is a picture of lungs that have been attacked by tuberculosis, and you see all the little holes and how the bacteria has just damaged all the tissue in the lungs. So tuberculosis is a very serious and active disease in our world, and I just hope that they continue to keep finding solutions to help the countries in other parts of the world that really are stricken with diseases like this, because when you develop tuberculosis on top of another disease, for example, like the HIV virus, your body is already, your immune system is already under so much pressure from trying to fight off the virus from the HIV, and then when you get tuberculosis, your body just can't keep up, and it just causes you to be more and more ill, and that's those cases that sadly end with a fatality. So I just hope that doctors and scientists continue to research this disease and hopefully one day find even a treatment that doesn't take as long as 6 to 12 months, because during those 6 to 12 months, patients also have to be quarantined and kept away from any and all contact. As a matter of fact, they even have to have their own separate ventilation system, because if other people were to breathe the air that they were to breathe, then they would become infected. Nurses and doctors have to make sure that they're doing their best to protect themselves and others from becoming infected, while that person that has an active case gets better. So thank you.